Well, hi friends, we're back here talking about calling. Jeff Hopper, Jeff Cranford. Jeff, when we left off last time, we were talking about how you have to get started in the right place. That if you get it out of order and you try to find your calling in order to identify yourself, you're in trouble.
Right.
And so you've got to get your calling and then go from there. And that getting the calling starts with saying yes to God.
Well, admitting there's a caller. I mean, that's
it.
Without a caller, there's no calling. Ultimately, there's existence, but there's no real call.
Right. So if you here I am, I'm reading my scripture, or I'm listening to my friend who's telling me about their experience with Christ.
Right.
And I can resist that and try to find my own way into some sort of meaning or calling, and I'm just not going to get very far in a satisfactory sort of way. The end is going to leave me wanting. What happened? I thought I had it. But if I start with the right place, I say, you know what? I don't understand everything you're telling me. You might say to your friend, or I'm reading this passage of scripture and I'm just basically praying to a God I don't even really know very well.
Sure.
Yet saying, I don't know what this is, Lord, but it makes enough sense for me to say, yes, I'm ready to keep going with you. That sounds to me like the right place to start. Would you agree?
Oh, no question. And it really is the journey of all the patriarchs. In fact, it brought to my mind, I was even thinking about Romans chapter 4 when it talks about Abraham. So Abraham was called by whom? A voice, a caller. He called him out of the land where he lived, and he's going to take him to a land that he would show him. Didn't give him all the information. A lot of people want all the information. We're not given all the information. We're on a need-to-know basis. And you say, well, why is that? Well, we have a general sense of the call, but we're on a need-to-know basis because if God gave me all the information, I would certainly destroy it by trying to do it in my own effort. And so we're kind of on this need-to-know process, and that was the case with Abraham. And then it goes on, and Paul is writing the Romans, he said, and he's talking about those who are justified, and he says, all who follow in the steps of the faith of our father Abraham, which he had while yet uncircumcised. I won't get into the detail in the context, but we've got to, in a sense, all of us are called to follow in the steps of Abraham. How do we do that? What were the steps of Abraham? He lived in a place, there was no, as of yet, no voice, no caller. He heard the voice, there was the call. He then decided to follow the call, not knowing where he was going. He had a general sense of being called out of where he was, but he didn't have the fullness of the picture, and yet he was willing to take that step. So we're called to take that same faith journey, to begin to walk and to begin to go down on those steps. And so that's the beginning. So it necessitates a caller, it then necessitates a reaction to the call, and then not a full and complete understanding, but a willingness to follow.
Do you think that that's where a lot of people maybe make the mistake of over-hesitating when they say, well, I can't see the whole thing, which is really an arrogant view, you know, to use a term that's obviously loaded with negative connotations. But when I look and say, look at Abraham's life, I say, well, you know, what's funny is, not only did he not know, there's no way he could have known. There's no way he could have known what his little life would bring throughout the arc of time. And so for us to presume that we could ever get a full handle on this thing before we say, okay, yes, I'm going for it, is a big mistake.
Yeah, and if you think about it, the first parts of calling tend to always be preparation. So when you look at the call, when was Paul's call? Well, it actually happened simultaneously to his salvation and his hearing for the first time the caller, and that would be what we call the road to Damascus. Saul became Paul. And then immediately he went away 3 years into Arabia and to be prepared, and then only then and after he came back. So part of the first steps of calling are not just, tell me what my calling is. That happens sometimes when we get wealthy guys into a church. They're not yet prepared, and they put them, because they're wealthy guys, and they put them right onto the board or the deacon board or whatever. And I hear that all the time. They said, yeah, I was asked to be on our deacon board, and I didn't even know anything about the word or the scripture or anything. And so there's always a season of preparation. And it's the same journey. Joseph, sold into slavery, is what? Testing and preparation. David, called as king, pursued by Saul and going into the caves of En-Gedi, and all the years he ran running, what were these? These were preparations. So sometimes we think of this mystical call as being very exciting, and we go straight into action. And typically it's a call of the caller, the voice. We're on a need-to-know basis, and then we go into a season of preparation. And I find that most need to find that I am in a season of preparation. Sometimes God was preparing me beforehand before I even knew it. He was preparing me. How so? Well, Saul, the Apostle Paul, Saul was being prepared, and he got his Roman citizenship. He was learning the scriptures. He had all this as preparation without even knowing the caller yet. And then he was called. God used that, and then the preparation in knowing the caller, and then he moved into his calling. Now, that may sound complicated, but it's just natural. It's apprenticeship, it's discipleship, it's go into all the world and make disciples, teaching them all that I've commanded you. I mean, these are the things. It was a natural process. And so sometimes I think people, again, they get the cart before the horse. They hear something. They don't know why they're on the planet. And they say, oh, calling. Oh, I like that. And they want to know what exciting journey they're going to have tomorrow. And the caller says, no, I'm just going to prepare you. And it may be 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 years before you're prepared. And some may say, well, you know, I'm in my 70s now. And I mean, how am I going to know calling if this is, I don't have 10 years to prepare. What am I going to start when I'm 80? Well, maybe, but you don't know. You don't know, but there's always a season of preparation. We don't know what those seasons are, but God will find that season of preparation of your heart, and then he will move you into a beautiful place of response.
I have an important question for you, and we'll keep it for next time, but it has to do with something that I think is probably going through some people's minds, and that is, great, but how do I know it's God's voice? So let's talk about that next time.
Good.